So in this month's webinar, we'll be covering the topic of group management. By the end of our time, you'll have the tools you need to address many different scenarios using groups to aid you in your workflow. So we'll talk about how to create groups either manually or by using the group request form to collect that information. We'll address what features a group contact has access to. We'll look at how to use a group for bulk registrations or reservations, depending on how many individuals you have or what kind of individual data you want to engage with. And then at the end, we'll go over reporting and what options are specifically available for groups. Now in Service, how you engage with groups really depends on kind of a decision tree of 3 different questions. And the first question is, do you care to manage the group as an administrator, or do you want a group leader to manage their own group? Next is the question of, do you care to know who all the individuals are within a group, or does simply knowing a number of volunteers suffice? And lastly, is the group working within the bounds of an existing opportunity in your system, or do we need to create a private event for them? So the answers to those 3 questions do not always have to be the same, but they will dictate how you engage with that particular group in Service and what features you use to get there. So let's kind of start breaking this down from the top. Again, that first question, do you want to manage the group or do you want the group to manage itself? We're going to talk about that kind of second option, that caveat of the group managing itself a little bit later. Let's start from the baseline that we are managing the group, and we want to start there. If you want to give the group other permissions, we'll touch on those kind of towards the end of this section. So let's assume we want to manage the group. So the first thing we need to figure out is, how is the group getting added into Service? And there's a couple different ways that you can do that. As an administrator, you can always go under Attribute Management, go into Group Management, and then in this section under Standard Options, click Add New Group. So you can always go through here and just build out a group into the system. Give the group a name, assign who the primary group contact is, or potentially also an alternate group contact. These people do have to have a profile. So if you search for their name and you don't see that, that means they don't have an account. You need to make one for them. On the right-hand side, there's a button here to add a volunteer profile. You can just fill that out briefly and add them into the system. I should note, you don't have to fill out everything from the admin perspective. The minimum fields are name and phone number, but I would treat email address as a required field as well, generally. Unless that person doesn't have an email address, because this is how that person logs in. And of course, a lot of communication will go to them this way as well. These group contacts don't have to have special permission in Service. They can just have volunteer access. So if you do name, phone, email, you can leave the rest blank, and then you can set them up as a contact. We will talk later about the access level specifically called group leader and what that permission gives someone, but it's not something that you have to give people in order for them to be listed as a contact. So you have your 2 group contacts. You have your group type, which can be public or private. This is only relevant if you choose to allow volunteers to self-select groups that they are a member of. If you're just adding volunteers to groups manually or via automation, like they used this reservation code, therefore add them to this group, then this is kind of irrelevant. But if you would like to, you can put groups on your application. And then when a volunteer is creating their profile, they can kind of look through all of the groups that you've listed as public and identify whether or not they are a member of that group. So generally this works best with things that are a little bit more loose affiliations, like churches or schools or things like that, rather than maybe a corporate partner or private clubs, things like that. So private means that this group won't show up in that list, and you would have to add people manually or via connections like reservation codes or private events. The group status, usually you want to make this active. If you are no longer working with the group, you can go in and update this and make it inactive. That's kind of what this is intended for. We could talk more about that later, but usually when you're making a new group, you want them to be active. And then below that, we have notes and tags. So if you just want to add some more information for yourself, like, hey, this group does really well with this type of opportunity, not so much with this type, you can add those notes in here. By default, group contacts cannot see this information, although there is a world where you could give them that permission. So that's something to be aware of. That's a particular setting, and we'll look at that later. The tags are, again, kind of an organizational structure. Usually, I recommend using these tags to identify sets of groups. So perhaps I want to identify specifically, this is a corporate group, right? I could use a tag like that. These are like the tags that you'll find in other places in Service, but it's a specific set, so they're related to groups. Once you've made a tag, then it'll show up or get suggested. So when I started typing corporate there, it suggested it. Or if I start typing school, I have that as a tag in my system too. Or like youth groups, right? You can see then like the options that you might be able to select, right? So you can add these in. Again, I usually see these and recommend these used to kind of categorize your groups, because then you can run searches for sets of groups and then engage with those contacts or run reports on that set of groups. Maybe you have a mandate to report on how many hours were served last year by all of your church groups. Well, if you've tagged them all as churches, it doesn't matter if they have church in the name. You can then go and search for them all and run a report on all those groups. So one other thing that these tags are often used for, you might have a situation where you have a corporate partner that's very large. Maybe it's a bank with multiple branches or just a really large corporation with a lot of different departments. And they send lots of groups and they all want to be a little bit different, but you do want to kind of group them together. You can use a tag to do that. Okay, so again, you can manually add a group into the system just from the back end, from the admin side, but you also have the option to sort of kind of aid this process by using what's called the group request form. The group request form is something that you can send volunteers to or post on your website or link out to, but it looks something like this. And you can customize this a bit. We'll look at this in a moment. But essentially this form is asking for someone to give you the name of their group. So perhaps I have a school that I represent. I give the name of that. I give my contact information as the group contact. And then there's a couple questions in here. And these are questions you can customize. The default questions are desired group participation level, which would maybe be like the frequency, how often they want to work with you, and then approximate group size, right? So there's these two questions in here. You can edit these two, and you can also add two more in. So if you want to ask more specific questions, perhaps when do you want to come in? What do you want to do? What kind of group are you? You can create those kinds of custom questions, and I'll show you where to do that in a moment. When someone fills out this form, let me just put some notes in here to show you. If we submit this group request, we just get a notification here. This is a publicly posted form, so volunteers aren't logging in to fill this out. This is something that you would send people to. And there's lots of different ways to do this. I just want to briefly show as an example on our website, we have kind of like a landing page that we might send people to, and there's a button for new groups, right? And this sends people to that group request form. So you are directing people to this form. And if you have questions about this kind of web integration, let us know. We can have a separate conversation about that. But essentially this form would be publicly posted. Someone fills this out. And when they do, then you will get a notification. So if we log back into the admin side, under volunteer management, there is a section called View Manage Volunteer Follow-up. And in here, I can see the follow-ups that have been created. The group request form generates one of these follow-ups. And you can also receive an email notification based on follow-ups being created. There is a setting for that, or you can just check them in the database. But we can see who filled out the form. If that person already had a profile, it links to their account. If that person did not have an account, it'll make one for them because they gave you name, phone, email. And then it has on the right-hand side, when did they fill out the form, and then all of the data that they gave you inside that form. So we can see all their responses to those questions, and this might inform what I do from here in terms of how I engage with that group. But there's a button in here you'll see that says click here to create a group. So if this is a new group, if I've never worked with them before, and I know that, I can click here to create a group. And what that does is it basically autofills the information from that form. So we have the contact, the person who filled it out, with the name of the group. This is made public by default and it's active, but of course you can change that. and then all the information from the form. So the answers to those questions, maybe I want to add, some tags based on that information, or some other data in there. Of course, I can go and amend this, but this is a way for you to kind of more quickly fill out this information. And more importantly, it's a way for you to gather that data from your groups that are working with you. So again, you don't have to use that publicly posted form, but it certainly can be a very, very helpful tool as you're trying to gather that information from groups, as opposed to trying to do kind of like an email back and forth. Now, once a group is in the database, now we need to answer a couple other questions, right? So we have the first question, who's managing the group? Is it me or is it the group itself? And again, we're going to get into the group managing itself in a little bit, because groups can actually add themselves to the database. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. So now we need to know, do I care to know who all the individuals are within the group? Or does simply knowing a number of volunteers who are attending suffice? So a lot of times this question more boils down to, do I need everybody to sign my terms? Do I need their contact info? Do I need their emergency contact info? Would I like to reach out to these people after the fact? Right, so a lot of times that question is also sort of in companion with this. But the root of the question is, do I need to know who the individuals are? Or do I simply need to know a number of volunteers that are attending? Let's deal with the easier case first. If I just need to know a number, right? So let's use my fictitious school name here. Let's say they're attending, it's a bunch of minors, and there are 30 people. And I don't want to have their information on file because they're all children. I just want to know that 30 people are going to be there for my records, for my planning's sake, and also for my reporting. Then what I can do is take this group, and to the left, there's an option that says register for an opportunity. I can click on that. Up at the top, I can say what event they're going to be attending, input how many volunteers they're bringing, add some registration note if I want to. Maybe I can say this is a middle school or they're middle school aged or something, right? So I can add my own information in here as notes. But this type of registration is what you might call a bulk anonymous registration. I do not know who these 30 people are. I am not intending to capture any of their individual information. Therefore, I won't know their names, their contact info. I will not have them sign the digital terms. I just have a number. So sometimes this is sufficient. And if you just need a number, then we're basically done. I don't need to do anything else with this registration. If I'd like to, I can send the confirmation email to the group contact. That way they know when they're scheduled for. That's probably a good thing to do, but I don't necessarily have to. I can just do the registration on the back end, which also means you can do this retroactively. So after an event, I could go into the event and register a group with X number of people. Again, not intending to capture any of their individual information. From a reporting perspective, this will identify as 30 participants and ultimately 210 hours scheduled total, because this event is worth 7 credit hours, right? And of course, you can adjust that stuff. I can go into the event and adjust how many hours they are receiving, adjust how many participants are there. So if things change, if we click on this event here, I'm just going into the event itself and I'm going to view the registered volunteers. We can see on this page, I have that group. To the right of that name, there's a button to add or remove participants. So maybe we had planned on 30, but lo and behold, several were sick, only 23 showed up. I can change that number, click update group participants, and now my reports will reflect how many people were actually present rather than the initial 30 that I was expecting. I can also, on the left-hand side, adjust their credit hours. So they're receiving the default for this event, as everyone else would normally. But if I want to give them more or less credit, I can adjust that through here. So again, if you're trying to do a bulk anonymous registration, that's basically it. You can do it through the group itself like we did, or you can do it through the event. You have the option on both sides. Now let's say I do actually care to know who these individuals are. I don't want to just have a bulk number. I would like to have them all create profiles, sign my terms, give me their contact info. Maybe I want to send them emails and kind of invite them back. In that case, I do not want to do this kind of registration. So I'm going to remove this. And now I need to ask the question, are these people attending something that I am already hosting and maybe this group is just taking some of the spots, whether it's a time slot event or a normal event. They're taking some of the positions within the event. Or am I really creating a private event for this group? So a lot of times that question more boils down to, what's your relationship with that group? And, do you want them intermingled with other volunteers, or do you want them to be kind of like a standalone event, right? So let's take the example of a private event. Right, we'll kind of give it that moniker. There's not a specific designation in service called private event. There are just some things to do to make an event private. So let's say, again, that school group's coming in. It's outside of what I normally do. I don't want any other volunteers to see this. I just want it to be specifically for that group. What I can do now is just create an opportunity. So I'd build it out like normal. If it's one date and time, I'd make a normal event. If it's multiple dates and times, maybe over the course of the semester, maybe I make a time slot event. It just kind of depends on what your calendar or schedule is with that group, what you would build out. But to make an event a private event, essentially what I would do is just customize the language on this event to be tuned to that group. So maybe in the name, I would use the name of the group. So I would have, the group itself and then whatever job they're doing. Maybe the description section would specifically address them because I'm not going to post this for anyone else to see. Maybe I would include their logo in the event. You can insert images through the description section, or when you're updating an event, you can add an image to it. So I would do things like that to kind of tune it to relate to that group. But otherwise, to make this a private event, all you need to do is choose not to publish it so that other volunteers can't find it. And then under the advanced options, you can also specify an associated group. So I can look up the group through here. What that means is that when volunteers register for this event, they will be added into this group. So that's kind of all you need to do to make an event a private event. Basically, just don't publish it and then tune it to whatever group you're creating. And then the most important part is, well, how do people sign up for this? If I don't publish it, where are they finding it? And every event in service, if we click into the name of any event and scroll kind of towards the bottom, every event has a private registration code link. And this link allows volunteers to register for events that aren't publicly posted. If we click on this link, there's two versions. They both do the exact same thing. You can copy it to a clipboard here, or if you want to, you can generate a QR code. So perhaps you're posting a flyer in a school or at a church or at a business partner. You can basically take this QR code, put it on a flyer, and then hang it up wherever you want people to register. But what this QR code does, or what the link that I copied does, I'm going to open up an incognito and go to that link. This goes straight to the registration page for this event, even if it is not publicly posted. So this is a way you would invite people to sign up for a private event, and then they don't need to know anything special about registering. They don't need some kind of special code or anything. They're basically just looking at the shifts and then signing up from there. If it's a time slot event, they can see the shifts that are posted. If it's a normal event, there's only one shift here, but they basically just register like normal. So that's how we would make a private event. Again, basically just build out an event and then send that private invite link, or perhaps post it on a flyer or something like that. There's one other kind of function within that world that I want to point out to you. Every event has a prefabricated send private registration code invitation email. So this is kind of what the name implies. If we click into this, it's a private invite email. So there's no recipient by default. You could look up whomever you want to send it to, but you can see that this basically just has the details from the event that we're inviting them to. And then below it has instructions on how to register. And this basically is just sending people to that private invite link and then telling them to follow the prompts. So you can certainly use this email if you'd like to, and then just look up whomever you want to send it to, maybe your group contact, and then send that out to them and have them forward it to their volunteers. That's another way to get out that invite. Alternatively, maybe you make your own template and then just paste in the link. Okay, so again, this is the scenario. I do want to know who the individuals are, and it is not an event that's posted for anyone else. It's a private event. So let's talk about the other scenario where I do want to know who the individuals are, but they're signing up for something that I'm already doing. Perhaps they're only taking some of the shifts within a time slot event, or some of the positions within a normal event, and there's still publicly available positions that same date and time, or maybe in a different shift, but I want this group to have all of this position. Pretty common stuff in like warehouse work. So in that scenario, we're going to use something called a reservation. So under opportunity management, there's an option called reservation management. And in here, you can create reservation codes. You don't necessarily always have to make a new code. If you work with the same group on a regular basis, you can reuse a code. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And in fact, that's pretty beneficial because there's some reports you can run reusing codes. But we can also create a new one. So let's do the new code here for our school we're working with. The reservation code is what people use to access these saved spots. I typically make this legible. So in my fictitious school name group, I would probably just say school name, right? If you're working with some kind of corporate partner or bank, I would generally just put their name kind of as the code. This will show up in some places for like volunteers to see or potentially select. So having it be legible makes a lot of sense. There is the potential that somebody guesses a reservation code, but the risk of that is fairly low in my estimation. So the description section, this is just for you. Why did you create the code? Who did you make it for? Typically, I would write in like the name of the group and perhaps add some more information as well. The contact person is generally the same person who's the contact on the group. This person has permission to see who has used their code. But then also, if you set a group association, anyone who uses their code will automatically get added into that group. So same kind of thing we saw with that assign associated group when making a private event, but this is with the reservation code. There's also a feature for expiring a reservation. So if you have a group who has consistently overestimated how many people they want to bring, and then you're kind of left in the lurch, you have a lot of open positions, what you can do is have the system expire a reservation code X number of days before the event. That way, those positions that hadn't already been used would get reopened to the general public, and then anybody could sign up for those. You do not have to have a reservation code expire. This would allow a group to use the reservation even potentially as walk-ins. So if you expect that the group members will not register ahead of time, but you still want them to make a profile and have those saved spots as walk-in volunteers, then you'd want to not expire the reservation. But again, in that scenario where a group is, usually overestimating and you kind of need those positions to be filled, you can have the reservation code expire early. In this scenario, you will definitely want to tell the group contact, hey, your spots are saved until X number of days out. And then in that scenario, it is not removing anyone who has used the reservation code. It's just freeing up all the spots that weren't used. So if we create this reservation here, I'm going to do no expiration. If we make a reservation code, this is really just a container at this point. I have not yet saved any spots. And we can see that there's a column here called items, how many shifts basically have been saved. We can click on that number, or on the left-hand side, click to manage the reservation code. And this takes us to a page where I can select, okay, what event do I want to save the spots within? So I can select the event here, identify how many spots I want to save, and then click on Assign Opportunity to Reservation. One important thing to note, which we just triggered, is that these reservations have to follow whatever kind of requirements are in place on the event. So if there are only 24 spots left in that event, like in this case, I cannot create a reservation for 30 people. If I want to do that, I would need to make more spots available on the event. But let's reduce that. Let's do a smaller number here. So we'll do 20, click on Assign, and now we can see we've saved 20 spots on this event. Now I can save spots in multiple events at the same time. I can save spots across multiple time slots. So let's use a different example. I have an event here called Sort and Repack. It's like a warehouse sorting event. And let's say I have 5 people from this group coming, 3 times over the course of the next couple months. If I click on Assign Opportunity to Reservation, it will say, great, which time slots do you want to save spots in? You can see I can't select all of these because some of them are full or there aren't enough spots available based on the number that I selected because I'm trying to save 5 spots. But I can go and pick, the shifts that I want to save those positions in. And then if we click on at the bottom, Assign Selected Time Slot to Reservation, it will save those positions. So what we're doing in this scenario is what the name reservation kind of implies. We are setting aside these positions for this group. Public volunteers cannot sign up for these positions now unless they happen to guess the reservation code, which again, probably not going to happen. So more likely, people will register for this event either by knowing the reservation code or usually what I like to do is send a private invite. So same kind of thing, sending a private invite to a private event. Each of these reservations has a link next to it. And if we click on that, we can grab that link. Again, we could make a QR code if we want to. But this link will basically send someone to that event and automatically apply that reservation code. So now they will only see the positions that were saved for them. Whereas if we didn't have this reservation code applied, so if we clear that, you can see there's only 4 general spots available on this event without a reservation code being applied. And again, volunteers can technically write in a reservation code if they want to, but usually I find it's easier to send out those links. That way you're not asking people to type something in correctly. You're just asking them to click on a particular link. Now, this link that I copied here was specifically for this one event, but if we back up, there's also a more generic reservation code link, which will send your volunteers to your event listing page and show all events that are available using that reservation code. So in my case, not only that Helping Hands repair team, but also 4 of the different time slots in this sort and repack event. So this can be really helpful if you have a group that's doing a lot of different things with you. You can send them one link that shows all the things that are happening. And another cool thing about this is if you have a group, let's say that works with you quarterly and you want to make a flyer for them and post it up, if you add new events into this reservation, they will pop up in here. You don't need to make a new link. You don't need to make a new QR code or a new flyer. You could have that kind of permanently posted somewhere. And then when someone's at work and they scan that, it'll show them all the relevant or upcoming positions that they could register for using that reservation. One final thing about creating these reservations is that you can also apply an image to a reservation code. I always encourage doing this, especially if you're working with like a corporate partner or a school or really anybody, just because it can make it feel more like that kind of white glove experience where you create a landing page for that organization. So if we look at this example here, I have added an image to this reservation code. So there's an icon here to add or update a reservation photo. Usually what I would do is just go to their website, right-click their logo, save it, and then upload it through here. But if we do that, now if we look at the link for this reservation code, this will go straight to, again, the event listing page, but now we have kind of like their logo here. So again, it's just a little bit more comfortable. It's kind of like a landing page for them. It kind of affirms to them, hey, you're in the right place. Okay, so this is kind of creating a reservation code. The last thing I want to mention about reservations is, two things. I want to mention when you're looking at an event. So if we go into one of the events that we just created our reservations for, we'll use that warehouse sorting example. If I go to view the registered volunteers, I can see on this page up at the top all of the reservations that are kind of being deployed or being used. And I can see how many have been consumed, and I can adjust those through here. So you can see that on the event itself. If I didn't happen to make the reservation code legible enough, I can also mouse over this preview icon, and it will give me more of the details, the name of the group, the full name of the description, the contact person, all that kind of stuff. So we can see more information here. And then we also get a column added to this page that tells us if anyone used a reservation code. so we can see which people used a reservation code and which one. So you can see that information kind of right off the bat. We also see that because this is a time slot event, we see the unused reservations at the top of each time slot as well. So you can kind of get a quick picture of what groups you're expecting, for this shift just by looking at which reservation codes are deployed. Okay, I had mentioned the idea of allowing reservations to be used with walk-ins. So I want to make sure to mention in the system configuration, there's a section for sign-in console or kiosk options, and there's a setting that says allow walk-in registration via the sign-in console or kiosk. And there's an option here that says yes with reservation codes. This does not mean that people have to use reservation codes. It means that they can. So again, if you are expecting a group to not register ahead of time, but you want them to be able to walk in and select their reservation code, you'll want this setting to be enabled. Again, it means people can use a reservation code. It doesn't mean that they have to. All right, and then one final thing in regards to reservations. I mentioned before that when someone's using a reservation, they still have to follow kind of whatever requirements are on the event in terms of availability, but also that means any restrictions that are in place. So when you create an opportunity, you can create, age restrictions or background checks or custom fields or checklist items or whatever. Your reservation code users will still have to follow those restrictions unless you choose to give reservation codes permission to override on this event. So this event is on this option is on every single event. If you want reservation codes to be able to supersede restrictions, you can select that here. There's also an option for the registration code. This is not to be confused. The registration code is like that private invite. So you could invite people to supersede restrictions that way as well. So choosing yes here allows both of those to override, or you can say people with a reservation code can override the restrictions on this event. And this can be helpful if, let's say you're working with a corporate partner and normally people have to go through a training before they can attend this event. But for your corporate partner, you're kind of expecting them to do the training. And so you're going to allow their users to override that restriction. You can allow reservation codes to do that. Okay, real quickly, a question came in asking if you can add a secondary contact for the reservations. No, there is only one contact when you're creating a reservation. So this person has permission, again, to see who has used the reservation code. It doesn't really grant them any other permissions in relation to that. The group contacts can still see their group members. So the secondary group contact, if there is an associated group, would have permission to... they'd have permission to see like their members and what they're registered for. So that may kind of give you what you need in that scenario. Okay, so that is, again, the scenario where I do want to know who the individuals are who are attending from a group, and they're attending something that I am normally doing. So we've talked about really many different scenarios where you are managing groups, right? So a group comes to you, and they want to work with you, and you either do or do not want to know who the individuals are. So maybe you just need a bulk number, or perhaps you want to know who all the individuals are. And then also the scenario where that group is working within the bounds of what you're already doing. So again, we make a reservation, or maybe we just make a private event for that group. So the last thing to kind of discuss is, what if we want the groups to manage themselves? So what kind of permissions do we have, and what can we do for that group? So when you're creating a group, again, you assign who a group contact is. If this person has volunteer access, they have the ability to see the members of their group. They can see what they are registered for, but they can't really manage their profiles. I can actually show you that with my profile. If I switch to volunteer access, I'm in charge of a group. So if I go in, I can view registrations, and I see not only my own registrations, but I also see registrations from my group members. But I can't necessarily edit those if I didn't initiate them. So if I created the registration, I can remove that. as a group contact, but not if I didn't do that registration, right? So this is kind of a normal baseline what a group contact can do without any special permissions. You can give your group contacts group leader access. If you give a group contact group leader access, then that person has permission to log into the admin side of Service, and they can see all of their group members and manage their profiles. So it's kind of like a mini admin role. They can edit volunteer accounts, they can manage registrations, they can run reports, send emails, but only within their particular group. This doesn't give them access to the opportunity management side unless they are also listed as a contact for an opportunity or as an event organizer. So you can kind of flip someone between those different access levels to give them more or less permissions. And one way to kind of tune that, in the system configuration under group management settings, you have the ability to give group leaders access to group management. I mentioned when we were talking about creating a group that those notes on the group are private, they're for admin only. But if you turn this setting on, your group contacts, or group leaders rather, will also have permission to see and add those notes. So that's definitely something to be aware of. The other scenarios where you can give groups permission to sort of manage themselves would be if you enable or allow group self-registration. So everything we've talked about thus far has a group contacting you, and then you initiate some kind of registration or reservation. This setting allows groups to do registrations or reservations on their own. So there's 4 settings in here that allow that. The no is the default. So if you have not changed this in your system, it should be set to no, meaning groups do not have this permission. And again, they're going through you. And normally that's a pretty good pipeline, but sometimes you need groups to be able to run their own reservations or create their own bulk registrations. It just kind of depends on how you like to engage with groups. So what these settings do, again, there's 4 options. We have yes, reserve only, yes, register only, and then we also have yes, create and register, and yes, create and reserve. So let's start with this reserve only option. What that does is if you have created a group, then the group contacts have permission to create their own reservations. So if we look at this in my demonstration console, when I go to register for an event, I am in charge of a group in my system. So if I click into register for an event, there's a button here that says sign up for the opportunity or sign up as a group. Now this button shows up for everyone because this is a publicly posted page. I'm not yet logged into my account. If I were not a group contact though, and I click on this sign up as a group, it's only going to show me signing up as an individual because that's all I can do. Since I am a group contact, when I click on sign up as a group, it has me log in or create a profile, obviously if I don't already have one, but now I can select my group. So in the dropdown here, it says, please select a volunteer or group, and I can choose a group. And then from there, again, I basically just sign up like normal. I select the event, select the shift, and then I identify how many people I want to register. So I can say I want to sign up 5 people, or I think there were 6 spots left in that shift. So if I click on 6, you can see it says create group reservation. So this is doing a reservation because that's what we have turned on in my demo console. So if we click on that, again, I can only pick positions that have enough spots available, and it's going to default to what I had selected initially. And then when I click on create group reservation, the system will automatically create a reservation code. And that reservation code will then consume those 6 spots on that opportunity. So you can see it says group reservation successfully created. Please check your email for additional instructions on how to fully register your group members for this opportunity. Because again, this is a reservation. It's only kind of saved the spots. So an email is sent that basically says, hey, thanks for signing up. You're not done yet. You need to pass this email along to your other volunteers and have them sign up using the link below. So that email automatically sends out the reservation code link that we looked at creating kind of manually. So if we look at this on the back end, we can see an automatically created reservation code kind of uses some of the group name and adds in a number there. But then it says auto created. And then we can see the contact is the person who did this, or the group contact. And then we can see the spots that were saved using that. So again, an email is sent out that tells them, hey, pass this along to your other volunteers and have them sign up. So basically what we're doing is allowing the group contacts to create their own reservations and then asking them to forward it on to their volunteers. So what we just looked at, that scenario, again, is having allow group self-registration set to yes, reserve only. This means you still have to create the groups on the admin side. Maybe you're using the group request form to start that off. And then once they've been added to the system, now they can do reservations on their own. But they're not doing bulk registrations. I still want to know who the individuals are. So you can probably glean what the other options here mean, but let me point them out. So yes, register only. This means we're not doing reservations now, we're doing bulk registrations. So if I had this setting turned on when I did that registration earlier, it wouldn't have given me the message, to check my email for what else to do. It would have said, you've been registered, right? Because we've just consumed those 6 spots. I don't need to know who the 6 other individuals are. It's a bulk anonymous registration. So that's another option here. And then the create and register or create and reserve do, again, kind of what their name implies. This is a pretty loose setting, all things considered, because what this allows is any person to create a group and either create a reservation or do a bulk anonymous registration kind of in one step. So any person who's registering can say, yeah, I'm signing up my family of 5 people. And then they just do a bulk registration and you never capture any of those 5 people's information. Sorry, that this is bulk or create and register. So they kind of, any individual can just sign up and say, I'm registering 5 people, and you're never going to capture any of their individual information, right? Or create and reserve. Again, any person can sign up and create a group for themselves and then make a reservation for X number of spots. It's still going to send them the email that says, hey, you're not done yet. Have your individuals sign up here. But any person can add their own group to the database and give it their own name and, kind of consume as many spots as they want to within that particular opportunity. So that's kind of what these 4 settings do. Again, if you're not totally sure about where you want to start here, I would recommend one of these reserve only or register only, just because it keeps a little bit more control in your hands. You're still creating the groups, but once you've kind of established that relationship, now that group contact can do their own reservations. Okay, while we are in here, I did want to point out, and you may have noticed it if you're eagle-eyed, this is where the group request form is customized. So in this group management settings, again, we're in the system configuration, you have the option to allow group requests to be submitted online, yes or no, and then you can look up the person who gets notified. And again, this is a notification in service. It's referred to as a follow-up. If you would also like to receive an email every time one of these is filled out, there's a separate setting in the system settings section that says send auto email notification of follow-up assignments. So anytime a follow-up is created, it also triggers an email to that person. This is not directly related to follow-ups for new volunteers, although they can be if you have that turned on as well. So apart from that, we have the group request instructions. So if you want to add more information to that form, you can do that here. If you want to preview what that looks like on the form, there's a preview icon. And then below that, we have the custom questions. So again, there are 2 default questions. If you haven't changed those, it's going to be like that frequency question and approximate group size, but you can add in 2 more questions as well. These other 2 are disabled by default. You can make lines of text or text boxes or selection boxes where you specify responses, like this kind of frequency question. Just use commas to separate the different options. Okay, well, the last thing that we're going to get into here today is reporting using groups. So reporting on groups in Service is similar to reporting on other parts of the database. Reporting in Service is very robust, and if you want kind of a top to bottom look at that, we have a couple webinars on the subject. But if we go under volunteer management into report management, there are a couple things to point out. If we scroll down in here, there is a report called the Group Participation Report. This uses the date range at the top of the page, so you can search for, maybe I want to do like a year-to-date kind of report. If we look at this report, by default, it's showing us all of the groups in the database, but you can look up a group by name. So search for them by name, select them, and now you're only looking at kind of their activity within this time frame. This would be the members of the group and bulk registrations. So if you're doing reservations and you have that group assigned to the reservation, people get added into it automatically when they use the reservation code, or same thing with private events, right? So this should kind of cover the gamut usually, although there are other ways to run this type of report. So this is a great way to look up an individual group, or perhaps search for a set of groups by using a keyword or a tag, more likely. I mentioned the concept earlier. If you have a corporate partner with many different departments or branches, you could tag them all with the same thing and then run a report on all of those groups at one time. So this is an inbuilt report that kind of gives you all the hours served by the members of the group, as well as bulk registrations. So there's this type of report. And then there is also an option to run reports using searches. So this first report type, for example, custom participation report, allows you to use queries to limit, which volunteers show up in the report, which groups show up in the report, which opportunities. So if your group reporting is more based on particular opportunities or particular reservation codes that you've used, then you can actually just run a search for that set of information in that part of the database, and then use these queries to limit what information shows up in the report. This is a little bit obtuse, so let me show an example. If we go into opportunity management, let's say that I have groups that participate in all of my cleanup events, and I want to run a report on only those events. I can search for events by the words cleanup. That'll show me any events that have that in the title. You can also run searches by tags or keywords or all sorts of other things. But let's say I run my search, I can go back into reporting, and then in this first report type, I can say, use my previous opportunity search, so only those opportunities will show up in this report and nothing else. And obviously the same concept applies to the group management side. So I mentioned previously the concept of searching for all of the groups that you've tagged as churches. Maybe you have a mandate to report on that over the last year. You could run a search for all of your groups that have a particular tag, right? So search for those groups by that tag, or what keyword. There's all sorts of different ways, again, to search in here. So you run a search, go back into report management, and then you can say include group activity or previous group search. Now, this is only the bulk registrations. So if you're talking about the individuals within those groups, then you would also actually want to select those groups on the group management page and say, show all of those members. So that would show you all of the members of those groups. And then if we go back into reporting, now we could say, okay, use my previous volunteer search and my previous group search. So now I'm viewing all of the bulk hours from those groups and all the hours from those individuals in those groups. And then this report will give me totals over whatever time frame I want to look at. So there's a couple different ways to do this. Just kind of depends on, how you want the information formatted and what's most important when you're running the report. I do want to mention, sometimes you have groups that work with you, and then the individuals from those groups come in on a regular basis too, and you want to parse out those hours. The best way to do that is if you have private events for that group, we'll just go and search for all the events that are associated with that group, right? And then use that as your query. Or if you're using reservation codes, you can search for a reservation code by group name or by a description or contact name, things like that. And if you do that, then you can see, a limited set of reservations. But if we go back into reporting, that first report allows us to say, use my previous reservation search. So this will only show hours completed via a particular reservation code or a set of reservation codes. So it allows you to really drill down and separate out. Even if an individual is a regular volunteer, if they came with their church one week and their work another week, you could actually parse those out. Okay, there are a couple other just quick reports I want to run through. Under attribute management, if you go into group management, there are some actions in here for exporting. So you can download a group spreadsheet through this page if you would like to pull kind of the group information. And if you're looking for like group contact info, then you can run a search for either the contacts of the groups or the members of the groups, depending on what you're kind of looking for, and then pull from this page a spreadsheet of volunteer information. So if you're talking about like data export and just pulling information, names, addresses, things like that, these spreadsheets are generally what you want to use. But if you're talking about hours, then all of what we talked about previously, the reporting section is where you'd want to generally find that. All right, well, we've covered a lot of ground today within the group management portion of the database. We're going to check through any questions that might have come through. So if you do have more questions, please continue to write those in, and we'll kind of address those here. We're done with kind of the major portion of our conversation today, but we will walk through the different questions that have come through. So a question was asked, how does a reservation contact find the information about who is signed up for their reservation? And I kind of showed this, but I didn't mention it. So it's actually really similar to how a group contact sees their members and the registrations that they completed. So if they log into their account, then they can view registrations and they'll be able to see those registrations in here. So they will see those people's names kind of reflected in here and who signed up basically. And they can of course limit this to a certain time frame if they want to. But this basically just shows them those registrations. So again, they basically log into their account and then click to view the registrations for upcoming opportunities, and that will show them those reservations as well. Okay, another question was asked if there's a way for the point of contact for a group to be included on the report, even if they don't end up registering for the event. So for example, they're just organizing, but they're not actually attending. If they're not registered for the event, they wouldn't show up in any of the traditional reports that reflect who attended the event. So if you wanted to include that information, it really kind of depends on how things were established. If it's a private event, then you could maybe throw that information into like the description section, but they're not going to natively be included on any reports if they don't attend themselves. So I would probably encourage putting that relationship, either expressing that via the reservation contact if it's a reservation you're creating, or if it's a private event, make them the point of contact for the event so that you have that relationship established. And then you could run searches by that data, but they're not going to show up as an attendee if they didn't actually register and attend. Okay, and then the last question here for today, obviously, please feel free to keep writing those in. Our team is continuing to answer those. But the last one we're going to address directly is, could you please show us how to put a restriction on a reservation based on training required? Certainly. So when you create an opportunity, and I should be clear, we're not talking about just a reservation. We're talking about an opportunity as a whole. So when you create an opportunity, then you can create a restriction set using these registration restriction options. By default, the system does not have any restrictions in place. So if you want to limit registrations, then you would basically select who is permitted to register. So that's the way registration restrictions work in CERVIS. So if we want to say an age restriction, they have to be 16 and up, then we set that as the minimum age. You can set an end age in here if you want to. CERVIS will put in 150 as the default if you leave that blank. So this restriction, the way this functions, particularly for ages, is it's applied based on the date of the event and the volunteer's birth date. So if they are under 16, but they will be 16 by the time of the event, they will be allowed to register for it. So that's how these restrictions work. Otherwise, you can set a restriction using things like background checks or custom fields or checklist items. Now, in particular, as it relates to having completed some kind of training, typically that's using checklist items. So we have other training material on what checklist items are. But in brief, you can, under attributes, create a checklist item, give it a title. This is where you generate the metric itself. And then where you actually track and record the info is on volunteer accounts. So I have, you can see in my example, an annual safety training. If we then go into the volunteer database, I can say, okay, this person completed the safety training. I could search for them by name, or I could select a number of people who maybe attended a training event. And I can bulk update this as well. But I can go in here and say, okay, they completed this safety training. Here's the date they completed it. Here's when it's going to expire, and then update their profile. And then this being marked as complete is what allows people to register for an event when this is selected as a restriction. So just to be kind of round that out, when you create an opportunity, if you select a checklist item as a restriction, it means that only people who have that marked as completed are allowed to register for the event, i.e. if it's expired, they will not be allowed to register until they kind of re-up that. So that's typically how trainings are tracked, because you can attach those dates to it. If it's like a one-off kind of binary thing, you could use a checklist item, or you could use a custom field that just indicates yes, no, have they been trained. Okay, well, again, we went through a lot of information today. We kind of covered top to bottom engaging with groups. And as you have more questions about this, please don't hesitate to reach out. Our customer support team is excellent, and they will get back to you right away. When you are logged in to your account, click on the Need Help button at the bottom of the page. You can type in a question or a topic through here. This searches our knowledge base. We have a lot of information in here. And if you like to have step-by-step instructions on how to do particular things within the system, this is an excellent tool. Typically, I prefer to pop these out. I think they're easier to view as a separate page, but you can certainly review them directly within this section as well. Apart from these articles, and actually, regardless of what you've searched for, you can always click on Contact Us at the bottom of the page and submit a ticket to our customer support team. So type in your question here, click on Send, and they'll get back to you right away. We have posted hours of Monday through Saturday, 8:30 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. Mountain Time. So inside those hours, you can expect a really speedy response. Outside of that, it just depends on kind of when somebody's in to check in on that. Apart from that, I wanted to reiterate, you can also, of course, review past recorded trainings on our YouTube channel. If you go to video.servicetech.com or go to YouTube and search for Service Technologies. A lot of the things that we discussed today, I kind of alluded to other videos. We have like a 101 training video. We have a video that runs through creating opportunities, kind of top to bottom, end of year reporting. We have webinars on checklist items and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of good information in here. We have some short form tutorials as well on more specific subjects, but this is a good place to start if you're looking for kind of more information on specific questions or specific topics. And then finally, I want to mention that if you would like to reach out for some one-on-one training, please let us know. You can always purchase training time, and we also offer training time in certain circumstances as well. So thank you again for attending today. I know it's a lot of information, so as you have more questions, please write those in. But we look forward to connecting with you again in our webinar next month.